Greetings, friends and lovers of fine audio. You have reached the Occasional Podcast, Episode 6, Munich. HiFi highlights and best of show. We are joined by the illustrious PTA writer Marc Phillips, who just came back from Munich and has all of the great highlights from one of the biggest shows in the world, really, I think the biggest show in the world, and the product were kind of crazy in terms of new releases and all kinds of good sounds that he recaps for you. Before we get to that, though, a couple of order of business. I want to make sure everybody is aware that one of the best ways to support this podcast is to, of course, follow up with our advertisers, the ads that you hear in the show, and that will graciously help support us. Also, one of the other ways you can support us is to check out the Record Weight collab we did with Part-Time Audiophile. We have a new amazing Record Weight. We have a few units of that left, but I just want to let you know that it is available on the Part-Time Audiophile site. So you go to parttimeaudiophile.com, go to the navigation bar, and there's a link that says Record Weight. You just click on that, and you can check out our store front there. There's a couple of t-shirts and such there as well. But it's pretty cool. I'm going to go ahead and say it's awesome. So if you go on to support us that way, check out the Record Weight and buy one of those guys. One other thing I saw that came across my desk before we get into the show stuff, there's a really cool graphic biography put out today about Miles Davis called Miles Davis and the Search for the Sound, written and drawn by Enter the Blue and Chasing the Birds, David Chisholm, who worked directly with the Davis family on the project. It's a graphical novel that chronicles Davis's journey from his childhood in Illinois to mastering jazz improvisation throughout the 40s, 50s, and 60s. A company called Z2 put this out, and guess what? If you go for the deluxe hardcover edition, it includes 3 art prints and a limited edition split 7-inch of Miles Davis, Miles Runs the Voodoo Down, and Spanish Key. So it's pretty cool. If you're a big Miles Davis fan, that might be something you want to check out. It's available for pre-order now on z2comics.com. That is Z, the number 2, COMICS.com. And they also have some pretty cool rare vinyl on their storefront as well. So that was something that came across my desk that I thought was pretty cool. I wanted to let you guys know. Now, as we say, on with the show. Here we go. Munich HiFi highlights and best of show with Marc and myself. Let's do this. Today's episode of the Occasional Podcast is brought to you by Woo Audio. Established in 2004, Woo Audio specializes in vacuum tube amplifiers and have won many reviewer awards for their innovative designs. Each amplifier is engineered and hand-assembled in Queens, New York, using the highest quality components and backed by top-notch customer service, delivered by real human beings. Woo Audio believes in making high-end audio products that deliver superior sound quality for a lifetime of enjoyment. Visit wooaudio.com, where better sound begins. That's WOOAUDIO.com. Today's episode of the Occasional Podcast is sponsored by Acora Acoustics, maker of high-end natural stone speakers. Acora Acoustics' goal is simple: engineer speakers that bring your music to life and bring the family together. Their loudspeakers are handcrafted to let pure sound take the stage, directly connecting you to the heart of your music and all its natural colors and vibrancy, while fitting exquisitely into your existing decor. Acora uses only the finest drivers, crossover components, wiring, binding posts, damping materials, and screws. Each component is hand-picked and screened for quality, first through meticulous measurement and then by thousands of hours of extensive listening. They know that when it comes to audio performance, nothing short of spectacular will do. See more at AcoraAcoustics.com. That's AcoraAcoustics.com. case you didn't read the title of this podcast, I want to just ask you, Mark, straight up, what have you been up to the last couple of weeks? I have absolutely no idea.
Well, I went to Munich, Germany, went to the show. Second year in a row, third time total I've been to Munich. And last year was kind of a hassle. I mean, I likened it to the movie The Martian, where I just had to keep solving problems so I'd go home. And the weather was, horrible. It was really hot. And the MOC, the convention center where they have the high-end show, has no air conditioning. So by the time you went up into the third atrium, the third floor, they were mini saunas. Every room you walked into was a sauna. This year was just completely radically different just because the weather was nice. It was typical German weather, upper 50s, cloudy. Like in my hotel room, I was like, I could sleep at night because they don't have air conditioning there either. Everything ran smoothly. I was gone and back before I knew it. It just flew by. At the same time, truly great show. One of the most impressive shows I've ever been to, just in terms of the gear and the systems that I actually heard. This is what the whole thing is about. This is what charged me in the morning, some of the experiences I had. So I'm going to say right off the bat, before you ask me, how was the show this year? It was freaking stupendous. I really had a great time.
It definitely seemed like, at least from a news standpoint, that the press releases and the product kind of announcements were off the hook. There were so many that kind of came out of this show specifically, and I kind of have a laundry list here on my end we can buzz through, but before we get into the laundry list, do you have any kind of early entries? We'll save the best for last, as we do on the show, but any kind of things that struck you out of the ordinary, perhaps, out of the shows, new finds, new brands for you, perhaps?
Everything. No, there were so many things this was a show where I got to see a lot of very exotic, rarefied, crazy gear, crazy systems, crazy ideas that you don't see so much in the States. So I started off my coverage with just the really crazy exotic stuff. So many systems that I can't tell you how many shows I've been to by now, but I just saw things that I never saw before. Huge systems and huge rooms and craziness but overall, really good sound. And I'll say this about Munich. Before I ever went to Munich, everybody used to say that it's a great show. You meet everybody goes there. It's not a typical show where the sound is great because it's all kind of cubicles and it's all sectioned off and everything. But at the same time, from last year and this year, the sound quality in the rooms, especially up in the atrium rooms, is exceptional. The only real issue they have in Munich at the MOC is the bleed through the room. So if you got two rooms that are cranked at the same time, you have to deal with that. But if you don't have to deal with that, you're going to hear some really incredible sound, as I did.
I do think there were a few snafus on the transportation front, but most shows don't seem to escape that kind of pitfall unscathed, right? Delivery, destruction in transit, this type of thing happens. It does happen, and it's always sad to see it. But I did see a couple of transit snafus on the way out there, but I think most people got their stuff up and running and, really kind of got the show going.
I will tell you one thing, and I won't call out the brand because it wasn't their fault, but there's a certain brand that I have yet to hear because they've been doing static displays for the last 2 years. And then finally, I was invited to the room because it had it up and running, and it was the first time I was going to hear this brand. And I get there, and they had a problem, an issue that they couldn't solve, so I'm going to have to wait until the next show to hear it. So the biggest problem at shows like these is that the ability of everybody to stream because, it used to be technical because everybody streamed at the same time. Now it just seems to be a matter of economics because these venues tend to charge a lot of money to give you really good internet hookup. And so once again, I got into the habit of walking into rooms and asking if they were streaming, and they were just working off of their server. And so that's a little tougher for me when they ask me what I want to hear and I have to go off their list and not mine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just a hint out there, if you're going to ask me what I want to hear, then we're going to have a much better visit if you're streaming and I could pick my stuff and not from your stuff.
So I'm going to launch into a couple of the things that came into my email box. One of the first things that come up, this is in like reverse order, and I have to make sure this is embargo lifted. Here we go. So DALI sent out a ton of stuff to my email box this week, and they really wanted to push hard. They have a new IO12 state-of-the-art headphones delivering true hi-fi sound. So Dolly came out with a pair of, you're usually known for their high-end speakers, aren't they, Mark?
So I went there last year. Summer, I visited Dolly in Denmark. And they kind of are going through a new era where they really are going back into the high-end audio. And the reason because of this is that they're not doing so much stuff. They're not outsourcing as much from China as they used to. They have a factory in China. One of the things I discovered is their Dolly Core speaker, their flagship speaker, $110,000. It's mostly in Denmark, and they found cabinet makers in Denmark instead of in China. So they were able to control the production, and that speaker was excellent. And so I know a lot about the trickle down where they're going to have to start going through all of their models and start applying this. So higher quality, because the problem is the pandemic. Shipments would arrive from China, they would arrive late, and they would arrive damaged, as you were mentioning about snafus. And so that kind of obliterates your budget anyways, because that's so much money that you're losing. So it actually became more cost effective for them to go back to Denmark. I did not hear the Dolly, although I saw the signs everywhere. I probably have to preface this by the fact that once again, Mark is doing the largest show in the world by himself, although I did have an assist from Mark Smazik, who's one of our newer writers. It was a bigger show than last year. Last year I did a pretty good job because of the pandemic. It was a smaller show, not everybody. This year looked like it was pretty much full blast. I heard 550 rooms.
So we can all expect 550 reports from you the next week, right, Mark? Right,
no,
Mark?
You will not receive that amount.
So the headphone, the Dolly IO12, shares some of their, what they call soft magnetic compound technology, SMC, that will launch in August, priced at roughly $1,500 US. So that's an interesting price point. I think they're kind of going for I would say, and this is maybe just me, middle high end for headphones. So they're definitely in the high end. They're above $1,000, but they're not going crazy in terms of $4 or $5,000. So there is that. And the other thing they have listed here is the Epicor 11, also being launched in August. 60K speaker with paper and wood fiber cone technology they're throwing out on this one, but it looks pretty cool. Dolly celebrates 40 years of loudspeaker innovation with the Epicor 4.5-way floor standers. 4.5-way.
I saw the previous generation of those, and that was until the Core came along. That was their flagship speaker, which was it was like $16,000 a pair. That's about as high end as Dolly was going until this new speaker came out. But now what they've learned from the Core, they're putting back in the line. That was the first line that they're going to kind of revise with the new technologies.
Now, ready? Did you see Voxative?
Voxative. Voxative. Okay. Voxative is a you know what? Whenever I go into the Voxative rooms, and these are the old-fashioned full-range single-driver kind of speakers with the whizzer cones and everything. Although they make their own design, but it looks like a louder. Kind of looks like Rhythm too. But they're really dynamic and they sound really good. And I like their stuff. Their rooms are always worth visiting at shows.
Now, Aretia.
Yeah, Aretia. I am actually going to pick up a pair next week from a local dealer because I'm reviewing them. Aretia is from Latvia, and I think their speakers are really good. So they have their smallest monitor, which has got a really unique look to it because it's kind of a trapezoid, but it has a huge round waveguide on the top of the speaker. Those are $9,000 a pair, and they're premium two-way monitors that I usually champion. They're really nice, and so I'll have those in for review shortly.
And then, of course, Inuas had a new Inuas. I
can talk about Inuas.
I'm finding this entire exercise a very serious exercise in pronunciation. I'm like, this is wow. Now, Inuas I've known for a while. They make great stuff. We always talk about how they do these amazing A/B kind of things.
Right, they did.
At the shows, which is very courageous in a lot of ways, especially when it comes to things that aren't traditionally accepted as making a huge difference. Media servers are one of those things where it can be polarizing depending on some people's opinions. But they go out there, they throw out their product and say, hey, check this out. They're excited to bring out a new Pulsar Network music server at the show. Did you get a chance to listen to that?
Absolutely. This one I could comment on because it's one of my favorites of the show. Inuos, not only do they excel at doing this A/B comparison kind of thing it shows, and every time you hear a difference, they do a really good demo of this stuff. And it's always something different, like was a power supply improvement. And the other thing they do is they always assemble really good systems. So they had this.
They have a good ear. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. They had Estelon speakers and Pilium amplifiers, and this is a server company, and yet their rooms always kind of wind up in my top 10 because they're so good at what they're doing. And so this time the A/B comparison was simply between their Statement music server, their top of line one, which I think it's about 18 to 20,000 or so here in the States, but they compared it to the Pulsar, which is a network streamer. What it is, they compared the two, and the interesting thing about them is you could run the Pulsar through the Statement server too. So, I mean, they work together, but they also work separately. But we compared the music through the network streamer and through their flagship music server, and there was a difference, but it wasn't that big. So it's really compelling because I think the Pulsar is more around the $6,000 price point. I love Inuos right now.
So also on the docket is a new Dan D'Agostino integrated that I think is one of the sexiest looking, exteriors on the market right now. And he kind of did take a lot of that cool stuff and bring it down into the new Momentum MXV integrated. And this is something that I would love to get in, but it is way outside of my price bracket. But
they were at the show, and they had that in a couple of the rooms. So my comments about that isn't about going to the D'Agostino room and listening to it rather than it being like it was in the Nordos system. The Nordos room was using a system. The Nordos room sounded spectacular. It really sounded good. And they've had two shows in a row at Expo, they really blew me away. The sound they had a Steinem, and they were getting the deepest bass I think I've heard at an audio show. It was just like, wow. But really tight and well defined at the same time. But it was good sound. And also VTL did very well this show too, but we'll talk about that later.
Today's episode of the Occasional Podcast is sponsored by Amps and Sound. Amps and Sound is a small family business in Southern California, born from a love for the legendary vacuum tube amplifiers of mid-century America. Their house sound is fast, transparent, and exceptionally dynamic, but never dry. Every amp is designed with the intent for low distortion, purity of tone, and musical involvement. Simply put, they want you to have your cake and eat it too. Check out their entire catalog of handmade amplifiers at ampsandsound.com. That's ampsandsound.com. Today's episode is also sponsored by Shit Audio. Shit Audio designs and builds audio components in California and Texas. Based in Valencia and Corpus Christi, their wide line of amps, DACs, and audio accessories fit any budget, starting at $49. For a full rundown of all their products, visit shit.com or stop by their retail store in Old Newhall, just north of Los Angeles. That's SCHIIT.com. That Cambridge Audio, a British hi-fi brand, is introducing a series of all-in-one players called Evo, Evolution, I don't know, maybe EVO, but they have a new Evo CD player as part of that line, and they are taking pre-orders for that. One of my favorites, and we've talked about this brand a lot, you can actually check out one of our podcasts where we interviewed one of the designers from the brand himself. It's actually, Mark, I think you might agree, one of my favorite interviews that we've done. Name Audio. It's their 50th anniversary. Another 50. We got a lot of anniversaries, 150. And this is a two-parter announcement. The name, and we talked about this on that show, the name Nate 50. So this is a $3,600 reissue, the 50th, and it's called 50 because it is the 50th anniversary, but the original one was the name Nate 1.
Yes, I'm so happy about this. This is one of the most exciting things at the show. So this was a rare year in which the Focal name room was actually mostly about name. So they're redoing their classic 300 line. And what they're doing is they're kind of getting away from some of the old stuff that people have complained about Name, because it's a very idiocy brand. But they're making things a little bit simpler. The two complicated things about Name has traditionally been their power supplies, the way everything gets hooked up in the system. And so I remember, I would hook up something and I'd have to go strictly off the owner's manual because I didn't know what I was plugging into where and why. And so they're going more toward a more streamlined way. They still are big champions of power supplies. That's everything to Name. That's what distinguishes them. But the hookups are going to be more traditional. They're going to have more choices in connectivity. It's going to be a little easier for the average person to get into Name for the first time and not feel like you're treading in water. So they have their 300 series classic, which is more of a traditional kinds of their power amplifiers and their power supplies than usual. And then I heard that system with Vocal Utopia, really nice sounding system. But again, the Name Nate 50 is something I've been waiting for years, because I've talked endlessly about my Name Nate 2 from the early 90s. I had a Name Nate 2. It was the one thing, if I could get back, because I think I traded it in on more Name, it would be that, because it was such a little gem and it had such good sound quality. And I know there's a lot of people who think the same way. Well, the Name Nate 50, this goes back to the original Name Nate, the Name Nate 1, with this kind of a clunky cosmetics comparatively to the later Name stuff. But they captured that look, and it looks like the original Nate. It's Nate 50. It's 25 watts per channel, which is a lot more than the Nate 2 was. And so it's a little bit more flexible, but it's still this tiny. They were handing it around. People were passing around. So this is an integrated amplifier that weighs, 8 pounds or whatever.
What? Really?
Yeah, they're small and they're tiny. When I had my Name Nate 2, I used to have dreams where I would stick it in my pocket and walk around and show it to people, because it's just, you're like, this thing is so little. So it's little. It's not I bought mine for $9.99, I think, back in 1992. They're $3,500, but I'm going to tell you right now that if this is anything like my Name Nate 2 from back in the day, it's going to be a hit. I definitely want this. This is very cool. This was one of the happy moments of the show. Truly, was walking in and seeing that. They did not play it, so I don't know if it's was a prototype or what. But they did not play it. But the other Name system though sounds spectacular. It was really good.
And that Name Nate 50 is going to be limited to 1973 pieces. So
because that's the year Name started. Yeah. So they're celebrating their 50th anniversary. So they're still I should buy one. Honestly, I should buy one if they're only going to be 1,973 of them.
Oh, no, and between you and me and the fence post, Mark, I love this like limited release stuff, especially if it's like slightly collectible and it's like, oh man, there's only 1973. It's like I and this is really just me being kind of weird. I think I would like to have this and just keep it in the box. I don't know. That's just me. Maybe there are a lot of people out there like me, but I'd be happy with that. I want to hear it. I want it to sound great, but also I'd like to just have one in shiny. What about this? I buy it, I keep it in a box, save it for 50 years, and in 50 years I open up, it's still brand new. How sexy would that be? Huh?
Well, you know what? If anybody out there has the original Name Nate 2, it might be worth a lot. So I bought mine 91 for $999, but I got a deal on it because it was a demo, so I got it for $699. So I sold it. I mean, I traded up on a larger Name, and then I missed it so much that I went back and I said, well, how much could a used one be from the day? $400 or $500 at the most and everything like that? No, they were starting at $1,500. They became, very valuable. So this one is probably good. It's probably a really good investment. But seriously, I loved my old one so much that I think I might just buy one. They're $3,500. Who cares? It's great. And
I feel that same way about my Oppo 105. I was like, how much could this thing possibly be? I went out there because the company's no longer with us on the audio side here, and I was like, oh shoot, it's like $2,000 now or something. It's obscene like that. It's almost double the price as the original, but really, really good CD player, guys. I got to say, it is so good for the money. I can't. It's one of those tragedies because they made good stuff for the price, and I think the phone division is just so much more profitable that it kind of went over. I don't know the reason, but I miss it.
You're absolutely right about that.
Another one, Grim Audio introduces the MU2 music streamer. They have a very high-end one, 18,000 pounds. MU2 is scheduled to be shipping in October at that price. That was at the show. That's a spicy meatball, huh? How about Legacy Audio? I haven't seen much of them in recent years, but I know they're at like a lot of shows. They have a new 15.2K, so 15,200 a pair in a standard finish Focus XD speaker that came out. Man, we got a lot here. I'm just going to bang through this real quick. Also, Nagra had some new stuff, and they are a Switzerland brand. And they were. Did you get a chance to go in their room? F130?
Actually, all 3 times I've gone to Munich, I've gone in the room because they always get the big room at the end of the hall. They put together everything they make and they just put it on a rack so it looks like one big giant system. And they usually use the biggest Wilsons they can use, which they did at the show. So it's one of the most consistently the most popular rooms at Munich. And every time you go in there, there's just it's a big room. There's a large crowd, but they're rocking it. It's a great sounding system. Just hideously expensive, I'm sure, if you added it all up, but way over $1 million system, especially I don't remember which Wilson they used, but usually they use like the Chronosonics, just the biggest stuff they have. They're really going out to impress everybody with the biggest and the best.
I'm just going to say this on the record, too. I think, formally, in my mind at least, again, my opinion, I can't speak to their new stuff, but at least the stuff that I heard a few years ago was the best sounding ESS Saber DAC implementation on the market. I mean, I was a bit shocked when I found out it was ESS Saber stuff, but oh man, it shows how everybody kind of argues over chipsets for digital and this, but it really showcased how implementation is so very important.
Oh, it's everything
when it comes to this type of digital transfer. And I tell you what, I know I say that all the time. I just think it was one of the best executions that I've heard. And again, not my house, not my system, other people's high-end speakers and all that, but still just an amazing job in terms of ESS Saber implementation. Now, on the other hand, there was something that came out really cool, I think, from Astel and Kern. They have the A and Futura SE300. It was roughly $1,900 at the show. And guess what? It's a portable player with not Saber DAC, but rather R-to-R DAC. So a ladder transistor DAC inside of a portable player. They're first, I believe. And it's a fully discrete 24-bit R-to-R DAC. What an interesting kind of pivot, you could say, from going to R-to-R kind of being an outsider for a lot of people on the DAC arena, now bringing it down into this tiny little portable unit in the A and Futura SE300. So I kind of found that was like a little sprinkle of a nugget of a fun little thing. And they also have the Aura IEM, a new collaboration with Vision Ears. So they also make the IEM ear monitors. I wanted to give a shout out to our friends at Rhino High Fidelity. They have a new premium vinyl series coming out. This week they launched with The Cars and Coltrane's Sound. So the Cars album called The Cars. And they will be exclusively available at rhino.com. 5,000 individually numbered copies that it will have a run. And it retails for around really close to $40 a piece. So you can go there and order those. Are you a fan of either the Cars or Coltrane's Sound, Mark?
Well, I love Coltrane, obviously. But the Cars, I was one of those bands that I really got into. It was after Rick Kokosek died. And I said, I'm in the mood to hear the Cars again. And I started playing the Cars and I just started diving in deep. And I was like, oh my God, this is such great music. So I think I'll buy that car, because everybody knows about the Cars' first album is like the closest thing you'll ever have to a greatest hits album, but in an actual regular studio release, because there's like 10 songs on it and 8 of them charted. Something crazy. It's such a great album. And I already have Candy O on a half Speedmaster, and it sounds fabulous. And the first album has actually got really great sound, so I'm looking forward to this. I think I will actually purchase this.
And they were remastered by a gentleman called Kevin Gray. So it is a remastered released for obviously for the pressing, 180-gram albums. And I'm glad you like the Coltrane stuff because I kind of signed you up to review the Coltrane Sound album for me. So, yeah, no, I'm volunteering you for a bunch of stuff you have not said yes to. So we can arm wrestle for it later.
I've got some interesting turntables coming in, so I need to review some vinyl. I've got Audio Note coming in, and I have an EMT coming in, and a Music Hall. The Music Hall Stealth Direct Drive is coming to me too. So I've got 3. Goodness. it's for $1,695. It's pretty sweet. It's going to be fun.
Do you have any accessories that recently came in that might help you with those review sessions?
Would you be talking about the part-time audiophile record weight? Because when I came back from Munich, there was a very heavy little box in my mail, and it had the 800-gram bronze weight, so I can't wait to use it. I have it, and it's sitting on my turntable right now, but it has not been experienced yet.
Yeah. Yes, guys, shameless plug real quick in the middle. Our solid bronze record weight available on the website. If you go, you can see it right at the top. It says bronze record weight in the navigation bar at parttimeaudiophile.com. You click in there. It's super cool. It's very, very fun. Yeah.
Makes a great weapon if you go out in a dark alley. You want this thing in your pocket because it's going to come in handy.
It is kind of like a giant bronze metal ball, like snowball.
800 grams.
Yeah.
800 grams. It'll do some damage.
So onward from the shameless plug. I kind of wanted to step it over to you, give you the reins, Mark, but how about this one? I got a Doug White release here regarding one of his brands, Tidal. Did you get a chance to experience anything from Tidal at the show?
Yes, Tidal for Bugatti speaker system. It's an actual whole system. They debuted the Tidal for Bugatti system, and the only people who were allowed to hear it at the show, I mean, this room was locked and guarded most of the time, were the Tidal audio distributors and dealers were primary. And then they I think they only let in one actual reviewer to actually listen to the system, to turn it on for them. So just one guy, and he works for Part-Time Audiophile, I think.
Who?
And his name is Mark.
It wasn't me.
No. It might have been me. I think I heard it. So no. Okay,
Longest
so this
setup for a joke ever. I give you. That was like a Norm Macdonald kind of setup. I love it.
Yeah. They actually also debuted two new speakers: their piano, which is their entry level, the Piano G3 and the Contriva G3. And this was the first time they played it, and most people could get in to hear those two speakers. And you know what? It was at that point, it was one of the first rooms I went to, obviously, to hear the Contriva and the piano. And they had the intra amplifier, and then they had the Contras controller. So it was a real simple system, 4 pieces with the cables. I was ready to pronounce that the best sound at the show. The Contrivas they're $80,000 a pair. The Contras is $60,000. The Intra is $28,000. So you're talking about, with the cables, a total system cost of about $167,000. And when you kind of present it that way, it's like, wow, that's a lot of money. But the point I made was that my review system in my house at times comes close to that amount, right around that amount. But it's usually because there's a ton of different equipment, okay? This is a system with preamp and a streamer controller, an amp, and 2 speakers, and the cables, and that's it. $167,000, yet none of my $167,000 systems that I had in the house came anywhere close to the sound quality I was experiencing with this system. So it really kind of changes the way you have to look at how you spend your money and what you want from your system. And if you're a streamer, if you're going to be listening to digital and everything, this system for $167,000 is just magnificent in every single way. Just sounded great. Go that, and you're going along, and you're saying, okay, I heard that system. That'll be best sounding show. But except for the fact that I had not heard the Tidal for Bugatti Royale system. And so finally, I had an appointment, 4 o'clock on Friday. I walked in there. I had to wait around, was in there, and it was a very intense hour. But I did get to pick 3 tracks of my own. And so, of course, I went with Chocolate Chip Trip. So I heard Chocolate Chip.
Shout out to Chocolate Chip Trip. I feel like we need to make it a thing. We're making it a thing. It's like Fetch.
It is. Well, you have chocolate. I chocolate tripped that thing, man. He played 3 of my favorite tracks, which were really weird, but I think it was like wildly fun. But anyways, let's talk about the Bugatti. The Tidal for Bugatti system is their Royale speakers, which is, they look like they're styled after Bugatti. And I'll tell you a quick story that I heard that was funny that Doug White told me, is that they broke into the Bugatti headquarters, and the main office has this Tidal system in it off to the side. And then they have a bunch of Bugattis in there. They actually broke into the headquarters. He said the first time ever somebody broke in, stole the speakers. And
what?
they stole speakers and they got caught, but the speakers got damaged and everything. Jorn Janzek of Tidal he was very happy that they could have stole a car. They chose to steal his speakers instead over the Bugatti cars, which are usually, most of them, I believe, are more than $1 million a piece. So anyways, that was funny. So that's how big of a deal these speakers are, and they really keep it under wraps. This is something very special. This is something that not every audiophile is going to get right away, because I've never heard such a direct connection to the music before. So where I was talking about the first system with the Contrive and the pianos was 4-piece system with cables. This is a 2-piece or a 3-piece. It is a pair of these speakers, the Royale RC1 controller. And you hook it up, and the RC1 controller does everything. It's an amplifier, it's a streamer, it's a DAC, it's everything you need. The entire system is $450,000. And now, while that sounds crazy, there were many, many, many speakers at the Munich show that cost more than $450,000 just for the speakers, for a pair of speakers. $450 sounds crazy to the average person. $450 is not the most expensive thing in the world, especially you're getting a whole system for $450,000. And it takes you back to the idea of, if you had $450,000 to spend on a stereo, and not every, very few do, but if you had that kind of money to spend on the system, nothing else is going to come close to what this system does in terms of resolution, frequency response. Just unbelievable. And it's like, I went in the room twice and heard stuff. So we're not talking about a lot of actual seat time, but I will never forget that experience, because, and I don't want to get into hyperbole saying this is the greatest speaker, but I figured out something important, is that, some criticism leveled at reviewers for picking, the new world's best every year. Oh, this is the world best in the world. This is the best in the world. And the truth is that I'm kind of on a similar journey where I keep hearing things that are the best I've ever heard. And it's not because I'm wishy-washy or I'm waffling or I'm being bought and sold. It's because it's about access. And once you start listening to this stuff and you start understanding it, people start approaching you and say, I want you to listen to something too. And then you listen to something else that's quite amazing. So it's just a parade of stuff that I can't believe exists out there, because it's so amazing. But at the same time, I could never buy any of these things. But there are people out there that need to know that if they want to go through the rest of their life completely happy and never want anything else from their music system, Tidal for Bugatti Royale system it's a game changer. And the word that people were banding about it's a reset. It's a reset of the industry. People are going to hear this and go, now what are we going to do? I don't know. I don't know where it's going to go from here. It's either people are going to say, oh, it wasn't really good. No. If you have a pair of ears and you know what you're doing, you're going to hear this thing and you're going to go, oh my God. They said they have people in there who were hearing it for the first time and immediately crying at how beautiful it was. So this is what you're dealing with, is something that, again, is pushing the envelope for everybody in high-end audio. And it's here. Next year, will there be something else? Maybe. But we are progressing steadily in this hobby. We are making things really, really good. And I think a lot of it has to do with digital streaming and how it sounds fantastic, but the technology allows it to actually sound better than we ever imagined.
Are you sure the tears just weren't for Tin Pan Alley being played for the 100th time that day?
No, but I did hear Tin Pan Alley being played a lot. I'm going to put this out here right now, that if anybody wants to know what drives me crazy is that Chris Jones song, No Sanctuary. It goes dum dum da dum dum. Oh my God! It's just like I hate the song. And then I was at Expona and I woke up and my sleeping room was next to a showroom, and every morning at 6 a.m. they would start off with that dum 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 dum. And I'd be like, oh, I guess it's time to wake up. And there's a whole new thing. It's guys with really low gravelly voices singing really low, and then they're all, it's kind of like the Leonard Cohen school.
Yes,
or there's a Johnny Cash tribute band that the guy sounds like his face is 10 feet across.
What's the one about the hotel? Something. It's like blah 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 hotel.
The one that they kept playing was Leonard Cohen, where it was you want it dark. We killed the flame. And it was just like, and people kept playing for this. And you know what? The music's actually really good. But the problem with these recordings is that it seems like they've so processed the vocals to be big and impressive that it no longer sounds realistic. And so I'm going to put that right out there. I'm getting away from that kind of music. I really am. It's never my taste anyways, but oh my God. But yeah, people have to start being more pioneering when it comes to their choice of music at trade shows.
You know what? I'm going to go on a limb and say it is the Beat Hotel.
You know, our hobby, we always tend to get into ruts until the next big thing comes along, which is why I'm trying to tell everybody play Chocolate Chip Trip over and over, and you'll be good to go. You'll be energized.
I'm not exactly sure, but I believe it to be the Beat Hotel off of Alan Taylor, Hotels and Dreamers, featuring Chris Jones, Martin Hodge.
Well, It's No Sanctuary is about Joseph and Mary, you know, looking for the
Yes! That's the one. Yes.
But it's like as a big kind of a Americana blues song, and it's just like not my taste. Sorry, guys. Quit playing it for me.
Moving on. After title, Mark, what kind of hit you in the chest?
There was plenty. So, I mean, like if Tidal hadn't have done what they did at the show, I'd have a lot of interesting choices for Best Sounded Show. And the first one would be Phasmation. Phasmation is a Japanese brand. They're relatively new to me. I've only known them for about 5 years. They make cartridges, and they make a line of cartridges that start off. The lowest one is about $2,000, but they go way up in price. But Phasmation also is doing amps, and they're doing amps and DACs and components. And so they teamed up with this company called Yukisemitsu. And I hope that's right. I hope the Japanese aren't rolling their eyes right now. Yukisemitsu makes a turntable that's really unusual. It's kind of a bare bones. You can see there's an inner shaft through the middle of underneath the spindle that goes to the bottom. It's open underneath, open architecture. It almost looks like a really modern EMT turntable, but it's very sleek, very fancy. I saw it last year as a stack display. Like I just walked up and said, "Ooh, that looks really nice," but never heard it. That turntable showed up in a few rooms, and it was a really good sound. So, and then they had these speakers called Wolfgang, big driver, but it was a slab of acrylic on top with the tweeter kind of floating inside of it. They looked interesting enough, but this system was, I mean, it's one of those really, really amazing Japanese systems that the inner detail is amazing, and they kind of project kind of a smallish soundstage that pulls you into it. So you're like almost like into a bubble where you're just surrounded by this really amazing sound. And I dug that room a lot. That was a really good sounding room. So that might be number 2 to the title stuff. It's a small system, smaller speakers, small components, a nifty looking turntable, but the stuff is really on the expensive side. So I wasn't really surprised by the sound quality. It's really, really good. The one that was a complete surprise to me was a company called ESD Acoustic. And ESD Acoustic is from China. And so you're thinking of Chinese audio and whatever ideas you have about it, you're wrong. So I go into this room, ESD Acoustic, they have a biggest room and perhaps the biggest system I've ever seen at a show. It was huge horn speakers, just dwarfed everybody in the room, and just row after row of these amplifiers just on several racks along the side. And this whole system was so crazy looking and so huge. The room was so big. And yet when you sat down in the sweet spot, you had this really, really focused, intimate sound that was completely surprising. So you'll see pictures on my show report about how crazy the show looked. It was pretty impressive. It was a lot of fun. A really interesting room, and I still don't know what to make out of it, but it was Audio Note Kondo. And so Audio Note Kondo is some pretty amazing, lofty Japanese stuff. One of their top systems hooked up to a pair of old Jensen speakers. They had 2 speakers in the room. One was a Graham Audio. It looked like LS59s, but they weren't playing. But there were these old, huge Jensen speakers with, just a giant single driver, giant wooden cabinets. They were beautifully finished in great shape. And so I'm sitting in this room and I'm noticing this is really kind of soft. It's very warm, very soft. It's probably rolling off at the top, although occasionally there would be some treble in there that would surprise me, like, oh, it is there. But it was a very, very, very soft, warm sound, and I think the average American audiophile is going to go in this room and go, I don't like this. But the funny thing is that the longer I spent in this room, the more I started to really kind of sync with everything and started to get into it. Everybody in the room, they were really moving. They're playing some kind of bouncy jazz on the big turntable. Everybody was the body language of everybody in the room. They were digging it. They were swaying back and forth. It was hypnotic. It was a really interesting experience. It was not typical. It was not the ultimate resolution, but instead it was a music machine that really took you back.
You know, Mark, before you go on, I want to comment on that. I love that idea of course, you walk into a room, you give it a listen, you get your experience. But observing other people's body expression like that, I think it's genius.
Yeah.
Like another way to kind of get the vibe of a room. You're gonna like, what is the vibe of a room? What's the energy of a room? These things are totally unattainable. Yet, I think all of us kind of experience it from time to time. But watching and observing other people's body language in a room is a very interesting way to kind of get a tap on what's really feeling. And I like that. I'm going to actually take a page from your notebook there, I think, and really kind of like tune in to my own feelings, but also the body language of others while I'm there to kind of get a vibe.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's great, man. I love that.
So, I mean, it's completely the opposite of having a room where people walk in and immediately turn around and walk back out.
Yes,
that's another kind of body language. Yeah,
that's exactly what I was thinking when I was saying that. It's like, you know what else happens? People walk out pretty quick sometimes.
Okay, next I have. We're going more into the kind of exotic and everything, but there's a speaker brand, and they're from Germany, and they're called Kawero, Kawero exclamation point. Kawero! So Kawero, when I first saw the Audio Note Condo system at Munich, that was back my first time in 2019, and they had Kawero speakers, massive, over $1 million system, really impressive in every way. So I was surprised that Kawero had gone off on its own because the Audio Note room had those old Jensen speakers. So this room was primarily three very, very good brands, and one was Kawero loudspeakers. The other one was Ypsilon, which is a Greek company that makes fantastic amplification, but they also do sources and phonopre's and everything. And then finally, the TechDAS Air Force One turntable, which I have to say one thing about TechDAS is that they were the star of the show because they were everywhere. There were TechDAS turntables everywhere at the show. And every room that had TechDAS turntable wound up sounding fantastic. So TechDAS, that's the hot turntable right now. They have one, it's called the 5. It's their bottom of the line, but it's $20,000 turntable. And it is the coolest looking turntable, and I've heard it a couple times, and I'm really intrigued by it. I think it's an excellent turntable. But this room was a room where the system took up a huge amount of real estate in the room. This was a system that you could actually walk around in and look at it from different angles and, double layers of stuff, kind of like Richard Mack's listening room where it's all just like stack after stack. And it's, and this room really got to me in terms of just the exquisite beauty of the sound where I just went in there and I went, oh, God, this sounds good. And I would relax and the stress would go away. And I really liked this Kawero room a lot. I thought it was exceptional. And then probably the last, I'll do a couple more, but one more was the Soundsmith room. If you've ever been to a show where Peter Lederman is doing a room by himself, people don't realize they know his phono cartridges, but he doesn't realize that he makes almost everything else in the system. He makes these brilliant little two-way monitors that he's been making for decades and decades. I first heard them like 30 years ago, and I thought they were fantastic back then. He has those. He makes his preamps and amps, and they're all in the style of his strain gauge stuff, where it's the wooden front. But he hand makes these amplifiers, and they're quite expensive, considering that Soundsmith cartridges are generally very reasonable for the performance that's offered. And then he uses STST turntables, which are very rare turntables from Germany, that he's sort of the de facto distributor, at least he used to be, because he always told me he'd get me one if I wanted to. But it's his favorite turntable, and when Peter Lederman tells you that this is your favorite turntable, then you kind of listen to him. And then he, of course, had Schroeder tone arms on him, which is also an exceptional tone arm. So even with the amazing little speakers, he just really gets just an amazing sound every single time. I really love the sound of his system, and it looks sensational. It's really crazy looking. And one of the things that Peter was talking about, I mean, he has a lot of new products coming out. He's got I forgot what he calls it, but unbreakable cartridges where you can't bust them. And I feel like as a guy who's busted a couple of Koetsu cantilevers, maybe I want to do this. He's doing trans-impedance phonopre's, but one of the things he really wants to put out there is the fact that his retipping costs are so low. They're generally 10 to 15% of the cost of the cartridge, which makes his cartridge much better value than other ones. I mean, some of these cartridges out there, retips are 90% of the cost of the cartridge. And so he's doing it consistently up and down his line, 10 to 15%. which is nothing. So you're never going to have this like disposable cartridge. And he starts bringing up the question of pay per play. How much does it cost you to play a single record? Sometimes on some of these really expensive cartridges, it might be like $10 to play a record. And he wants people to start thinking in terms about what is your cost per play, and then compare that to Soundsmith. And I thought that was an excellent, excellent point of his. And he does mostly himself, I think. I think he has one or two people helping him. But chances are that Peter Lederman is retipping your cartridge for you, and he's doing it right. It's amazing. So, you got to love Peter Lederman. If you know him, he's just a wonderful guy in every respect. And then finally, this has been a surprise, and I mentioned this brand at Axpona, but it's VTL, Vacuum Tube and Logic. Been around forever. Luke Manley's been heading it. Everybody knows VTL at Axpona and with Nordost. But when I went to Munich, he had Wilson speakers. He had Alexias in there. He had DCS once again, and he had Nordost. And it was just this another oasis where I went in there and I just said, I wasn't having a stressful day as much as just lots to do. Yeah. Saw him. He's Luke Manley, if you don't know him, he's just one of the nicest guys in audio, just a true gentleman in every respect, and so grateful and humble, and he's a wonderful guy. I just kind of, after these two experiences, like I got to make his, a visit to his room part of my routine, because he's 2 for 2 on really knocking my socks off. And I think that's about all I have for now. I mean, I can go on, but that's my good stuff right there. Oh, and one more thing, Von Schweikert. Von Schweikert is really, they were in the room, and the way they had Ultra 7s, and they had all the VAC electronics as usual. But they did an amazing thing, is they accomplished perhaps the deepest sound stage I've ever heard in my life. It was just a mirror CD of a live Michael Schenker performance. And they were like, "Hey, do you like Michael Schenker?" And I'm like, "Well, okay." And so they played for me. It was really impressive. It was a live track. And I've never heard a better portrayal of audience sound, because if you know anything about live recordings, they don't mic the recording for the audience. They mic it so the audience always sounds like it's way far in the background. It's you're micing the music. Well, in this case, it's just such a fantastic job of making me feel that I was in the audience, and it was very panoramic sound staging. But I really felt like I was in the front row, and that people were clapping to the side of me and behind me. And I have never heard it done that well before. And so kudos to those guys. Brilliant system. And I finally got them to play Chocolate Chip Trip for me. And it just kicked ass. It just kicked total ass. It was fantastic. I had a lot of good chocolate chip trips at this show. I'll say that right now.
Is there any particular reason, as we close out here at the end, that you think that Chocolate Chip Trip is a good track to evaluate a stereo with? Is there anything specific about it that you like?
Well, I mean, that's a long story I've told before. I'll give you an idea, is that after I played it in the title room with Bugatti system, neither Doug White nor Jorn have heard that track before. And I think that Doug has probably heard me talk about it, but he wasn't interested. It's Tool. It's, I don't like Tool, but it's a drum solo. But it is one of my favorite drummers of all time. He's an amazing drummer. And it is a wildly dynamic track. Both Doug and Jorn at the end of it were like, "Oh my God," it's like so dynamic and so realistic. You should easily be able to imagine Danny Carey, the drummer, sitting 8 feet from you. And it's one of those tracks that always sounds pretty good no matter what you're listening to. But having these huge systems where we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, even million and more, and they're playing this for me, it's like having Danny Carey in the room just hammering those drums, and it's unbelievable. It's just fun. It gets my juices flowing, gives me goosebumps. And it's really funny because when I first started playing it at shows, I would notice people would get up and leave. Other people would come back in. For some reason at this show at Munich, maybe it's a more sophisticated crowd, I don't know, but they always put me right up at front. And so each time I got up and looked back, and it was a full room that totally locked into it. But it just became this kind of a ritual and a fun thing until I started hearing it being played in other rooms just randomly as I walked down. Oh, they're playing it. People are using it for a reference track. Just listen to it, just stream it on Tidal, listen to it on a good system, and I think you'll understand what I'm talking about.
All right, guys. Mark, again, thanks so much for coming on and helping us get a scope of the worldwide market at this certain point in time. It sounds like a really fun trip.
You got to go. If you're an audiophile, you got to make the trip at least once. It's so much fun.
The Occasional Podcast is a production of the Part-Time Audiophile Network, which includes parttimeaudiophile.com, The Occasional Magazine, the PTA newsletter, and audiohead.com. You can stay in touch with us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. The Occasional Podcast is produced and hosted by Brian Hunter. Executive produced by Scott Hall at PTA Productions. The Occasional Podcast and its original associated music is monitored, mixed, and mastered on the Focal Trio 6 BE studio monitors. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the Occasional Podcast on iTunes, Google, Spotify, or wherever your favorite podcasts are downloaded.